7:30 to 8:30. You can come for 5 minutes, or you can come for the whole 3 hours. The only thing we ask is that you don't bring any children and no one under 21 is in, because part of the fun is that a group of bartenders from the region will be making their own special martini concoctions and offering free samples of those. So when you mix art and martini, boom, you get the artini. That's how it all works. The second event that we do is the Business and Arts Lunch. It's a paid, or rather a ticketed event that we do in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce. It's at the Antlers Hotel this year on October 10th. I would certainly invite you to consider joining us. We'll have about 400 people there to celebrate innovative intersections between arts and business. The other thing we do is throughout the region put up all kinds of marketing and branding for Arts Month. I gave Joni a couple posters she's going to put in the backyard there, she said, so I appreciate that. Allie mentioned the Litter Letter Project. If you look at that bottom right, it says Inspire. This is last year. We partnered with Creek Week last year. They collected litter from our waterways and from our public lands, and different groups adopted a letter, filled the letter with trash, and then we used all that trash and those letters to spell out last year the word inspire and made a temporary piece of public art that was up during Arts Month. This year we've added another letter and we're going to spell out the word pristine, and we're going to dedicate that on October 1st at 4 p.m. just south of America the Beautiful Park. The sculpture will be up just for the month of October. It's a wonderful collaboration with Creek Week, great way to emphasize the importance of keeping our natural environment clean, but also using arts as a tool to affect that kind of change in our community. We also depend on local organizations to take the Arts Month logo and use it in their branding and marketing so that we can expand our reach during Arts Month from a promotional perspective. We appreciate all the grassroots support. This is another part of what I do that's important. Who's that handsome gentleman up in the top right there? No, I wasn't patting myself on the head. I was speaking of you. We appreciate every year that you come and allow, or that I come and you allow me to request this presentation. And if you don't mind, I would love to take a photo. We've been putting it on social media, so anyone who wants to be in the picture for this year is invited to do that. But this is an important opportunity for me to connect with our elected leaders to talk about how important Arts Month is to the community. As you can see from this graph, it's been growing every year, heading in the right direction. We're really excited for this 6th year. We feel like it's going to be bigger and better than ever before. Why should you care about all this? Well, I would suggest to you that in addition to the wonder that is art in general, the nonprofit arts and cultural sector in this region generates $153.3 million in economic impact. That's a significant amount of money that the arts and culture sector pumps into our economy. I would also argue that if you want to attract and retain quality workforce, you need to create a community where there is a vibrant art scene. That's what young folks want. They can move wherever they'd like to in this country in this day and age. We need to create an environment that makes them want to move here and stay here and help our businesses to succeed. And ultimately, for those of us who live here, it's important for education, especially for our young children. It's a wonderful way to enjoy ourselves at a concert, at a festival, at a theater production, and it brings us all together as community, and I think that's important and needed more than ever these days. So I think the arts and culture community, the sector, is very important throughout the region. I will just share this bit of information with you before I wrap up, and that is we currently have a 10-year cultural plan for the entire Pikes Peak region that will expire in 2020. We are working with the B. Vredenberg Foundation now to begin the 2020-2030 cultural planning process. This will take into consideration other plans that have already been completed, but this will be our roadmap for arts and culture in the next 10 years. We'll start that in January of next year and release it in Arts Month 2020. So October next year, the plan will be released. So to wrap up, I'll remind you that I'm extending an invitation to everyone in the room to come out to the Artini, to come out to the Business and Arts Lunch, to use the peakradar.com/artsmonth website. If you're a hashtagger, hashtag ArtsOctober. And ultimately, I invite you all to have one new cultural experience with your family or friends, whether that be at the Fountain Community Theater, or in downtown Colorado Springs, or up at the Ent Center for the Arts. Wherever you'd like to experience that, that's what Arts Month is about, having one new cultural experience. So thank you for your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, and if you will indulge me, I would love to take a photo after the proclamation.
Okay. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation in. Proclamation declaring October as National Arts Month, whereas the month of October has been recognized as National Arts and Humanities Month by thousands of arts and cultural organizations, communities, and states across the country, as well as by the White House and Congress for more than 2 decades. Whereas the arts and humanities embody much of the accumulated wisdom, intellect, and imagination of humankind. Whereas the arts and humanities enhance and enrich the lives of every American, including those of us living in the Pikes Peak region. Whereas the arts and humanities play a unique role in the lives of our families, our communities, and our country. And whereas the nonprofit arts industry also strengthens our national economy by generating $166.3 billion in total economic activity annually, $153.3 million in economic impact locally, and by supporting a full-time equivalent of 4.6 million jobs, 5,070 jobs locally. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the City Council of the City of Fountain, do hereby proclaim October as Arts Month in Colorado's Pikes Peak region and call upon our citizens to celebrate and promote the arts and culture in Fountain, Colorado, and to specifically encourage a greater participation by those said citizens in taking action for the arts and humanities in their community. Done this 24th day of September 2019 in Fountain, Colorado. I'll make that my motion.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Applegate. Please vote.
6 yes, motion carried.
Thank you. Mary's going to take a photo if anyone would like to be in it.
Should all go down.
Often to get to be featured on social media, right? You can also.
Or in front of it.
You're the boss. All right. You good? You want to get a couple on the other side?
You're the art guy.
All right. Sir, would you please? How's that?
That's better.
All right, we're good.
Oh.
It just died.
What's your code?
Okay, everybody's saying cheese. Okay, Arts Month.
Arts Month.
Okay. Hey, Martini.
Thank you.
Statue, there we go, statue painting.
Awesome. All right, Mayor, thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you all, council members. I appreciate it. We'll give you that.
I know, I always make my beer.
Okay. Let me find my agenda. Our next proclamation is declaring October 7th, 2019 as World Habitat Day. Please come forward.
Hello, I'm Chris Medina, the Executive Director and CEO of Pikes Peak Habitat, and I have Ian Probert, Director of Development, and Laura Williams-Parrish, who is our Community Relations Manager. I want to thank you all for your continuing support of permanent affordable housing and the fact that you've actually been out on our construction site. Aha, we're up and running. Thank you. Maybe. We're just going to talk through this because I'm not going to be able to. So I want to give you an update on what's happening with the projects here in Fountain. Country Living, we have selected the final 6 families of our 34 homeowners there. And so we are looking to be closing that neighborhood out in December of 2020.
Oh, wow.
All of the 6 remaining families, they all have different needs, but permanent affordable housing is key. When this neighborhood is built out, we will have 130 individuals, 41 kids, and a lot of really happy neighbors in there. Big party. We'll be inviting all of you, so look out for that. There we go. So these are 3 of the 6. Maybe I'll get it to go. Okay. Because I'm going to talk fast because I know you've got a big agenda. So, because we're getting ready to close out this neighborhood, we've been acquiring land little by little, predominantly along Race Street. On Illinois and Race, we picked up a parcel where we will be building 3 single-family, single-story homes that have single-car garage attached this time. It'll be actually an extended garage. It'll be 22 foot long so that families will have more storage. We named this property Micah's View. It's right across from the elementary school. And the reason why we named it Micah's View is for Micah Tice, who was a young man who lost his life on Longs Peak last year. He volunteered with Habitat. He was a U.S. Air Force Academy preparatory cadet. He helped his fellow students during the evening by tutoring them before getting to his own homework. He would fall asleep during class, and they didn't mind it because his heart was there. So we named this Micah's View not only for the young man's memory, but because of his spirit in volunteerism, in thriving for education, and for his belief in building up his community. Down the road from that is Jacob's Run, also named for a volunteer who was killed a couple of years ago in a car accident. Jacob was a young man in his early 30s, had just been out celebrating his graduation of his second master's, and unfortunately, the driver was impaired and he was killed. But Jacob served with us on our finance committee for 3 years. This will be 5 homes once it's done, providing the city approves a variance that we'll be putting forward. We did have to demolish a little 1800 era homestead, asbestos abatement. Some buildings came down as far as outhouses, and we filled in a couple of wells, and away we go. So we'll be selecting families for Micah's View, probably starting marketing in October, selecting going to the board in April. Jacob's Run will run a little bit later, possibly a year out. But just know that we're here in Fountain. We're still looking for land, and we look for your support. And, you know, it's a pretty cool thing that we do. Not only do we build homes and build community, we're also doing repairs. We've done a few repairs down in the area. We have one that's coming up in security. It's an external paint job, a little just light rehab on that. But we have applied for a $100,000 grant. If we get that, it's going to be 2 years, so $50,000 per year. Approximately $5,000 to $10,000 per home on repairs. These are major repairs, so this is replacing roofs, siding, and providing access for the aged. So if someone is in their home, they want to age in place and they cannot afford the upkeep, and they're looking to sell because their home is in disrepair, this is something that they may qualify for. So keep your fingers crossed. We should know about this in November. In the meantime, as we get little grants here and there, then we will be selecting families on one-offs. But this one could be a really big promotion. We'll also be looking for veterans specific on this as well. So that's a really fast update on what we're doing. We're here. We want to keep supporting Fountain, and we definitely appreciate your support.
Okay,
And we need volunteers, so keep coming out.
okay. Thank you. Yeah, we love having Habitat here in the community and providing homes, so it's a good thing. I'm going to go ahead and let Ms. Thompson read this in.
Okay. A proclamation declaring October 7, 2019 as World Habitat Day. Whereas World Habitat Day was established by the United Nations General Assembly in 1985 to be the first Sunday in October to recognize the concerns and conditions of adequate shelter for all humans and to encourage grassroots action toward improving housing conditions worldwide. And whereas during World Habitat Day, Habitat for Humanity draws attention to the important role decent housing plays in eliminating barriers to a better, healthier, and more financially stable life. And whereas through the Cost of Home campaign, Habitat commits to mobilizing our partners, volunteers, and community members across the U.S. to find solutions and help create the policies that will improve home affordability for 10 million individuals. And whereas Pikes Peak Habitat for Humanity has assisted 169 families attain permanent, affordable housing in El Paso County. Whereas the purpose of this proclamation is to raise awareness and to educate and mobilize individuals and communities to take action on the current local and global housing challenge. Now therefore, the City of Fountain hereby proclaims October 7th, 2019, World Habitat Day in El Paso County. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, the City of Fountain hereby proclaims October 7th, 2019, World Habitat Day, done this 24th day of September 2019, Fountain, Colorado.
Okay, and I'll take that as your motion. And Mr. Lauer?
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval. Please vote.
6 yes, motion carried.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Oh, she wants a picture.
Y'all coming out again? No.
Yeah, I was trying to sign it real quick.
Actually, going to sign the proclamation, yeah.
I need to get Sylvia to sign it, but she's not here, so.
Okay, well, we'll go with yours. How's that? You want to, I'll put my thumb.
There you go. Good idea.
Thank you. You want to take
Yeah,
that?
I'll take it so
Thank
she
you.
can have her sign
I'll
it.
get my thumb dry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll move on to item 4B. We have appointment of Mr. Ryan Medlin to the Recreation Facility Advisory Committee.
Can do that.
And he's not here?
He was here last night.
Okay. Okay, and this is Whitefield's appointment? Yes. Okay. All right, so we'll just go from there. We only have one person, so. Mr. Geek?
I make a motion to approve Ryan Midland for the advisory board.
Mr. Lauer?
A second.
Okay, we have a motion second for appointment. Please vote.
6 yes, motion carried.
Okay, item 5, City Council agenda requests and announcements. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't have anything, Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Geek?
Nothing tonight?
Mr. Applegate?
Nothing.
Mr. Lauer?
Just real quick, our Fountain Creek Watershed District Board meeting will be this Friday here in Chambers at 2 o'clock. And then the other thing was had an opportunity this weekend to go up to the Fallen Firefighters Memorial. And if you can be there and keep your eyes dry and not cry, you ain't got a heart in you. Just seeing, between the U.S. and Canada, seeing 150 some odd new firefighters who gave lives in the line of duty is a really sobering experience. So I was really happy to be able to make it up there this year, and would recommend anybody who can next year, please do. It'd be well worth your time.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Thompson?
Yeah, a couple things. You guys may notice Commissioner Lehinos is not here tonight, and Commissioner Gonzalez. Right now, there's a phone call going on with Senator Bennett's office, and I was invited to be part of that. Obviously, we have council meetings, so I asked him to listen in for the whole Fountain Valley and get back to me on what that is. It was something about the PFAS and PFOA. I wasn't really sure. But so he is going to get in contact with me what that was. So I appreciate him covering it for us tonight, doing kind of double duty as commissioner and then helping us out. And last week was such a busy week in Fountain. It was, if you didn't have anything to do, there was so much going on. And I'd like to thank the Parks Department and all the city employees for the great community night out we had on Tuesday evening. I think we had about 600 people through again, I heard. We got that off the hot dog count. So at least that many hot dogs went out. And that was really great and thanks to the fire department for manning that booth and doing that. That's always a fun event. And those kids love those horns. Next year, can we disconnect them? No, I'm kidding. They love those horns. And then I had the event Thursday night, which had a lot of things here. And Steve Schleicher came down, the assessor. He said Fountain had some of the best questions regarding VRBOs and the laws and things surrounding that, and that was really good. Electric Department, fantastic event on Saturday for the 100th anniversary, and very interesting. I was wondering when they're going to get that dummy off that pole, and they finally did. So, and then today you got to practice some more with the power outage, right? So that was exciting. But great events, lots going on in the community this last week, and it was I'm sure tiring for our staff, but fantastic things for our citizens to see and do. And I'd like to just do a shout out to Renee Green from Rainbow of Friends Preschool up at Restoration Church in the school they have up there. They celebrated their 20th anniversary this last weekend, and I think that's really exciting to have a preschool and a school in our community. And she has started another one in Southeast Colorado Springs and starting a third one. So good for them and all the great outreach they're doing there. So.
I just want to thank Carl and Heather, right, for putting on such the good event on Saturday for our electric department, 100 years going strong, and just really neat event and things like that. So thanks to all that and the linemen and who are out there every single day doing all that work. We appreciate everything you guys do for us. So, but please pass along our thanks to Heather as well. Okay, we'll move right on to public to be heard. This is funny because it says public to be heard, public to be heard. It's just public to be heard. So if you have an agenda back there, it says twice. But citizens may address the council on items that are not on the agenda. We ask that you sign up with the clerk prior to the meeting. We have cards in the back. We may not be able to provide an immediate answer, but we'll direct staff to follow up, and out of respect for the council, others in attendance, and our agenda, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. I have one card, Ms. Meininger.
Deborah Stone-Meininger, community advocate, citizen scientist. I will attempt to be a polite mob scene of one for you. When I was looking to see if I could see my notes of what I covered last meeting, I couldn't seem to find them online. So I will repeat it again just in case it didn't get recorded somehow or people didn't hear it. When we're talking about testing our water, that is not just testing the water to produce numbers. That's also showing the community that we can trust our elected officials in our utility department to do things, not just do it to make a show of something, but to do it in the best way, the most honest way, and to the guidelines that are recommended by the EPA. Now, in the information I've had over the last few years, there is only one company that tests parts per trillion on the water for the PFAs. And according to the EPA notes, they're testing for PFOS as well as PFOAs. And that combined total is what's tested for at the 70 parts per trillion. If you're testing for elephants in the room and they're saying it's dangerous if there's mice in the room, and you say, oh, there's no elephants, that's being very disingenuous to the public. I'm sorry, that offends me. That offends me on all kinds of levels. That's like being lied to by your parents because they think you're too stupid to know any better. There's a lot of people who don't like to be treated as if they're stupid. And to do the right thing, not just change the paperwork when it gets printed out, but do the right thing. To test it properly, and it should be tested before and after, because, as I said before, that we have variable sources of water. We not only have the alluvial well water from Whitefield that has been used for decades in fountains waters. We have also got the water that I was concerned about, which is the number one well, I was told by Curtis when I asked him about it, that's supposed to be the well that takes the water from Fountain Creek. So that's a second source. And then we have the water that comes in on the Fountain Authority pipeline that's been there since 1985, that comes up on the west side of Highway 25. And we only own a small portion of that. But I was told that we have access to some of that water as well because we have invested in the SDS system, so it's a trade-off that we can use some of the underutilized water by Colorado Springs, 75% of it, that we can have that into our water for a while. It would be nice if we were kept up to date, which water source we were using on the reports, as well as the correct testing for the parts per trillion for the PFAs. Thank you very much.
Curtis, go ahead.
Mayor and council, we do test 2 parts per trillion. We do use an EPA certified lab. If you look at our consumer confidence report, the report shows it in parts per billion, but it's 0.0002. It's less than that, which would be non-detect. So if there's any confusion about that, we're certainly willing to take questions, but we also do report in our consumer confidence report all the sources of water, Fountain Valley Authority, our well water. We do test the water before it goes through filtration at our 2 wells that are currently in service, well 2 and well 3. And then we also test the water in the lead and lag filters. So we're continuing to do that weekly. We test all 6 perfluorinated compounds that were a part of UCMR 3. We're going to continue to do that. All 6 compounds come back as non-detect, which is less than 2 parts per trillion. With regard to the Fountain Valley Authority and the Southern Delivery System pipeline, we are not using capacity that's loaned to us or that belongs to Colorado Springs utilities. We are using our own capacity in the Fountain Valley Authority pipeline and in the Southern Delivery pipeline. I know there's some confusion because there's a swap agreement between us and Colorado Springs utilities for capacity in SDS in return for capacity in Fountain Valley Authority. But that capacity does belong to Fountain, and that is the capacity that we are continuing to use and will use in the future. So I hope that clarifies some of the comments, and would be happy if you've got any additional questions, council, to entertain those.
Okay, no, I don't have any other questions. So it's really a matter of where the decimal point is. Regardless if it's 2 or 0.002, it's still into non-detect levels.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. That is the only card I had, so unless there's anybody else, we will. Okay, we'll move right into our consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be approved with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen requests, in which case the item may be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. We have items A and B. What would council like to do with this consent agenda? Mr. Applegate
I move to approve the consent agenda.
and Mr. Geek.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval. Please vote.
6 yes, motion carried.
Okay, no old business. We'll skip right over to 9. New business, item 9B, resolution number 19-058. A resolution to approve and award the construction services contract for construction management, general contractor for the utilities joint use operations facility to Daniel Berry Construction, Inc., in the amount not to exceed $10,700,000. Mr. Trainer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you can see on the agenda item, it shows that Todd Evans is to be the presenter tonight, but he's not here this week because he's enjoying the birth of his new first baby grandson.
Oh, cool.
Which, by the way, I want to pass on the word that baby Liam was born last night, I guess this morning at 3:01 a.m. And sounds like mom and baby are happy and healthy.
Awesome.
So
Congrats.
best wishes to him and his family.
Yep.
So what you have before you is a approval. I know the council's had multiple conversations on this issue over actually several years. Earlier this year, not too long ago, we brought together the financing to the council, so we'd have the financing in place. That's now done. Todd and his team have been spending months negotiating with Daniel Berry on getting the guaranteed maximum purchase price that is below the budgeted amount that the council set, which he's now done. It's taken a while. There's been a lot of work and effort that's gone into that. But what you have before you now is the result of that, and that is a total price, guaranteed maximum price agreement for $10.7 million to build the operations facility, which will house all the water and the electric operations for our utility.
Okay, and so this is, I mean, we've gone through the whole vetting process of where the money's coming from and all that.
Yes.
And this is merely, we're just appointing who's gonna be doing the work.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, this comes out of the utility funds. It's financed through the utility funds. And as the council recalls earlier this year, and John, I don't remember how long ago, well, John's not here. I don't see her. Anyway, he worked to bring the finance to the council. We approved that a few months ago.
Okay. All right, any questions from council? On this item, okay. Go ahead.
So can we just backtrack just a little bit on this? So when you call it a joint water and electric department, customer service is not moving over there, that's
No.
correct?
Correct, right. Customer service will remain right there.
So can you explain a little bit better about what you mean is gonna be actually housed in that facility?
You bet. So right now, we have our water operational folks. So those are the guys who are out working in the streets, repairing the water, all their materials, their pipes, equipment, that kind of thing, is housed over behind the Lorraine Center. And for electric, we have all those up at our Southmore property. There's a yard up there where they have the same kind of thing for all the linemen and the work that they do, up in the same area that we have fleet. So those two areas are the folks that actually work in the field, repairing, constructing, doing that kind of thing. They'll be housed up here in this facility.
And all the large trucks and equipment and everything
All
that
the large
goes with
trucks and
that?
equipment, right.
Okay, so the electric department moves out of Southmore.
Correct.
Okay, so that will be just fleet services there, and that we will retain that property and keep using that property.
So we will have fleet service there. One of the goals with this, when we, to step back a little bit, to talk about that, about a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago, the council had some pretty good discussions about our overall facilities. And one of the things we were trying to do is decrease the number of facilities that we have. And so right now we have, those two folks operating in different facilities, and one of them is Lorraine Center. One of the things we'd ultimately like to do is really just pull everyone out of the Lorraine Center. So ultimately, streets will move up there, short-term parks will move up there, recreation, we're still trying to work on a location for them, but really we'd like to get everyone out of the Lorraine Center as well.
Okay, and this is money coming out of the utilities fund, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So the money from the utility department cannot cross over and become part of the general fund and go into something like transportation or parks, is that correct?
That's correct.
It can only be used for a project within
It's-
the utilities department.
Right, yeah. Utility funds are legally restricted to stay within the utility fund and be used for utility projects. The only time you'll see crossover, and we have this in our budget every year, is when you have functions, for example, administrative functions, finance functions, HR, those sorts of things, inside the general fund that provide services for those utility funds. You'll see that kind of thing. You'll see the transfers for use of rights away, those sorts of things. But yeah,
And were the utility rates changed at all to pay for this? Or is this just paid out if they've been saving up for it?
it's paid, and Curtis might be able to speak to that more directly. I know our electric rates have actually decreased, but no, this has
Can you
been.
repeat that again a little bit louder?
Excuse me, sorry. Our electric rates have decreased.
Okay.
So Curtis, do you want to speak to that as far as the budgeting goes?
Yes, and it was a part of the last two rate cases, the one for water and for electric, so we did include this building and the funds needed for this building. The funds are coming from bond proceeds. So if you recall, several months ago, we came to you with regard to our desire to use bonds for several projects. This is the biggest of the projects that those bonds will be used for. So there's electric bond proceeds and water bond proceeds that will go for this building. So it's not cash funded, but it's funded by bond proceeds.
Okay, so it's funded by bond proceeds. There's no rate increase. Our electric rates have gone down. And I just want to make sure that we're getting that message out there clear, that this is to get rid of a building that Lorraine, that we're having some issues with. Everyone will move over there. Customer service is not moving, and that the electric department is moving there. So we're combining a couple of buildings, because Fleet really needs more room to be able to do what they need to do. So no electric rate increase to pay for this,
Let me clarify, we did have
Okay.
a base electric rate increase
okay?
of 3% that went into effect January 1st of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's kind of offset because the Pueblo Hydroelectric Facility went into operation, so our cost of wholesale power has gone down to the point where it essentially negates or offsets that electric rate increase.
Okay,
And council, as you know, we're currently negotiating a contract, a wholesale power supply contract with a third party as well that would have the effect of reducing electric rates as well. But in that electric rate case that included that base rate increase, we did include the debt service for the bonds that we borrowed, the money that we borrowed.
Okay.
So it has been a part of the overall process for the 2019-2020 budget, along with the 2 rate cases.
Okay. So we've been discussing this for quite a while, just because we're actually, as the mayor stated, we're actually going to give the contract out to somebody tonight. This is not a new project. It's been on the books. It's been brought to council in open meetings multiple times for people to have input and to learn about this, right?
Right.
For at least a year.
Yeah, we actually started talking about this probably 5 or 6 years ago, before the school district decided to acquire the property, and we worked with the school district on swapping the city property on Alabama with the property, the Lorraine Center property. Because at the time, if you recall, there were walls that were being held up by filing cabinets. And so we had a facility that was just really substandard, but it was I think it was a very positive thing to work with the school district to allow them to make the swap, which allowed them to move forward with their middle school building. And the Lorraine Center, gave us at least some more room in the yard, and the facility wasn't being held up by filing cabinets. But it's got its own set of issues. It's got HVAC systems that don't work, roofs that leak, drainage that floods constantly. There's a whole myriad of issues with a building that old. So that began the process, again, the discussions years ago. And if you recall, a few years ago, the water, there was a path that we were on at one point where the water utility acquired the property on Wilson Road. You remember that? And we were going to move forward and build a separate water facility and then a separate electric facility. We thought, well, wait a minute. Let's get some economies of scale and do these things together. We don't need 2 separate facilities to maintain and operate. So we wanted to bring those together because that just made sense, and then put them on property that we already owned.
Yeah, we already owned the property, so we didn't have
Right.
to purchase the property. Do you remember
Yes, ma'am.
approximately when that property was purchased?
Okay, this is an approximate number. I'm guessing 2008 or 9. Does that sound right? Eight? Okay. All right.
2008. Okay, all right. Okay, and so if somebody had a question about this project, they're just kind of learning about it now.
Sure.
Who would be the best person on this staff for them to contact with their questions?
Probably it depends. If it's something very specific, well, I would start with Todd.
Okay.
Because
Evans at
Todd Evans.
fountaincolorado.org.
Thank you, yes. Perfect.
Okay.
I only say that because he would be able to direct them to, if it's a specific question about construction, a question around that, there's some folks that have been working on that. If it's a question about the negotiations with the contractor, he's been working on it directly, I think with Troy as well. But he would probably be the best first point of
Okay,
contact.
so again, his email's tevans@fountaincolorado, all spelled out, .org.
.org,
So that would be a great place. But I'm going to add a but. He is out being a grandpa this week, right?
This week, right.
All right. So
Let me
you
throw
might-
in his phone number as well real quick. It's
Okay.
322-2022.
719.
719-322-2022. And I know Todd, and he'd be happy to have a conversation with anybody about that.
Okay, next week.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Applegate.
Yeah, I just had one question. The lot where the electric is now, do we have any plans for that, or what's going to happen with that?
Yeah, so we will have fleet that'll expand a little bit because they're just to the walls right now. And then we have, we will be moving streets and parks up in that area.
Okay.
Fleet's currently there, though, right?
Fleet's currently there, correct.
But they're
In one side of the building, right.
That'll just give them.
going to
more
take
room.
up more of the
Very
building.
restricted.
Great.
And streets will be moving where?
Up to the electric facility.
You know what's going to be really great is when they come in at 5 a.m. and they go beep, 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 beep,
It
they're not
won't-
going to have anybody up there to bother. And
Right.
that is it was where we were before it was a problem, where we are now it's a problem. So
Yeah.
that'll be great to get them up there
It's
so
been a
so
concern.
people don't have to listen to that. Okay.
Okay, any other questions from council? Okay, any questions from public about this?
Gordon Rick, Daffodil Street. 2 quick questions, or a couple quick questions. How long are we expecting this construction process to take place?
Good question. They've indicated that they should be in the building by October 2020, about a year.
And then, I don't know if you can answer this question. In the contract, one of the line items on the first page is daily cleaning $68,000. For a construction site, I'm struggling to understand why that cost is so high. If you can't give me an answer tonight, that's fine.
Yeah, I couldn't speak to that. That would be the amount that they, I guess, project that they would be spending throughout the year to keep the site clean. I don't know, Carl, can you speak to that? Well, you haven't really, have you been involved in that piece?
Not
Okay.
really, but for a year, calendar year, to keep it clean on a daily basis, the streets.
And by the way, I assume that's also hauling off the debris? That's part of the debris haul-offs and the dump costs?
Let me tell you, as somebody who's had construction going on for 14 weeks on her property, that they are not cleaning up daily. I'm out there picking up trash every day. I've got a giant magnet thing I roll around every day. I've picked up 5 pounds of nails so far. So it's really important that it's cleaned up every day and hauled
Yeah,
off.
I don't think that's it. I think he's just
yeah.
concerned
No,
about the
I'm just
cost.
saying though, it is, but if we didn't, we'd have trash blowing everywhere from there.
And I think a large part of it's gotta be the dumping, the tipping.
If it's dumping, then that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
One other thing that I wanted to mention with that is this facility, when we looked at 2 separate facilities, we were looking up in the $14 to $15 million range, potentially more than that. There was actually some real economies bringing these together. And then even then, the initial costs were significantly higher than we thought they would be. And so we actually spent a lot of time, when I say we, I'm speaking really for Todd and Carl, spent a lot of time value engineering, going back and forth between here, the contractor, the architects, and actually we spent some of our own staff time hauling dirt. They looked down to even having our own folks haul dirt that was given to us to help cut hundreds of thousands of dollars off the project. So they cut, I want to say, close to $2 million off this, Carl? Okay. Because we just knew at that point, we had committed the council to really keep it under there. We needed to have that maximum price, and so they just really sharpened their pencils.
It's good.
That's just a huge kudos to both Carl and Todd for really spending time. Again, Troy, I don't want to misspeak if you were, I don't know how much you were involved with that. They did the real work. Okay, all right.
Well, and Daniel Berry for being willing to work with us on that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
I'm assuming by moving into a new building, it's going to be as energy efficient as possible.
Not as possible.
Well, I know
Reasonable,
within
as
reason. Within
Right.
reason, yes, I know.
Yeah, because you can really, the sky's the limit with that. So they're really doing all they can to really, within reason, make it energy efficient. Yeah, because boy, when you get looking at LEED and the different ratings you can have
But that's
it can
gonna
get out of control.
potentially have some savings costs that are
Yes,
gonna add up
yeah.
in the long run.
on the operational costs. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a quick question. What will happen to
Name
the
for the record.
property on, Fran Carrick, I'm sorry. Fran Carrick, Shumway Road. What will happen, or what has happened to the property on Wilson Road? And then what is the plan for the properties that the city owns now that's housing or holding the equipment? What's the long?
Can she repeat her questions on the mic? The people back in the back couldn't hear you because you turned away from the mic.
I'm sorry. Okay, so what is the plan for all of the properties that Fountain owns for utilities? Wilson Road and then Stratmore, I believe we have some property there. Southmore, sorry, Southmore, and Lorraine. What is the long-range term plan for that?
Thank you. I think those are actually really good questions. So right now, what I would say relative to Wilson Road, that's an asset that we acquired for 5 acres for $70,000 is the number that's in my head. That's really close to some other properties we're getting ready to develop. I think it would be, now, we haven't had any definitive discussions on that. I think it would be worth considering keeping for a little bit to see if that value goes up with development out there. But that'll be up to the council to decide, and we'll be having conversations on these, because the second part of that question tied to Lorraine, that's a really good question. And we've had just a few sort of tentative conversations internally to figure out, okay, what happens with that? We got part of that building that really needs to be, actually the majority of that building that needs to be probably torn down. you do have a little bit of it that's actually in pretty good shape. So I think what we'll need to do is come back with the council and the community to discuss that, because we certainly have needs. I mean, one of the things we've talked about, and again, please, none of this is in concrete, but as we think of the different things that are in need, we can see right now that our cemetery is at the limit. And so, we talk about from time to time, what are we going to do for our future residents about a cemetery site? Is that Wilson Road? Is that Lorraine? Well, if you're a neighbor to Lorraine, you might not like that. So I think there needs to be some real conversations with the community and the council about those two properties in particular, because there really could be all kinds of potential. There's some challenges with the Lorraine property, but there's some potential there too. The other property up on Southmore, that is really one of the things I didn't mention, but that this project really benefits the general fund, is the fact that through the vacation of the electric department out of the property on Southmore, it allows general fund operations to move out of facilities that are substandard and are really a challenge for us, and move up to a facility that it's small. Certainly it's small, doesn't meet a lot of our needs, but for the smaller operations of streets and parks, it's going to do a decent job meeting our needs. So we'll continue with Fleet for sure. It gives them a little bit more room to expand and move into the additional bay space up there. And it'll give our other general fund operations some more room, because it's not a terrible property. It's a big concrete building. So we'll continue to use that for the citizens of Fountain. But I really think those other two properties, that we're maybe not there yet, but I think as the council and as the new council comes together after the election, they probably are going to want to have some conversations about, all right, what do we do with those properties? What makes sense? So does that help answer that, Fran?
It does.
Okay.
I have just one more question. On the financing, do I understand correctly that the utility department helped finance this building? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We're their tenants. We pay them
Okay.
a lease rate.
So that, somehow that money could be used to build this building. Is there any way that part of the proceeds from the utility department can be loaned to the street department? If they loaned it to the city to build this building, can a loan be made to help with streets? That was a question asked of me today.
We've explored a lot of different. Can you guys hear me? Is that better? Okay. We've explored a lot of different options to include that one or something similar, but the problem with that is for streets work specifically, there's no collateral, and so there's nothing that the bank can use as collateral to secure the loan if you're doing street work. So like this building, you could get a bank to give you money for it because the building itself would be the collateral. But if you're doing it for streets work, there's no way for the bank to repossess a street, right? And so we've had some struggles trying to find money for streets because of that problem.
To
We
make
still have to
sure,
pay it
though,
back
that
anyway.
everybody caught the last thing that got said, I'm not sure. Curtis, utility owns the building. So any space that the city uses, in the building, we are leasing
We pay a lease
from
through our budget process.
to the budget process.
Yeah,
Right.
correct.
Electric fund owns this building. Right. So utilities is not loaning money to the city to build the building. Utilities department is building the building, and then once it's finished, whatever space that we use that's not utilities, we'll be leasing that
Right.
space back. Just like if they need to use our HR department, they pay us back for those services, right?
That's correct.
So the city of Fountain owns the utilities. Is that right? The city of Fountain owns the utilities.
But it's a separate business,
Right,
basically.
but
When we
It just
sit up here and
appears
act
like
as a
we're-
utility board, we're not acting as council members, we're acting as a utility board.
But we do own the utilities, don't we? Do we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when you say utilities, you have to be very specific because we don't own Black Hills Energy.
I know, I want
you
to be
know.
specific. So the utilities owns this building. What does Fountain own? What does the city of
The
Fountain?
properties that Scott was referring to earlier are the properties that we own. Lorraine, South.
We're not renting any of that from the utility department, Scott.
Scott.
Renting, sorry, I missed that, renting which?
Are we renting any of that property?
We're renting this one right now.
Just
That's what I
this
can
one.
tell you. Here's what I would tell you, and maybe this is a different way to think about it. In our private lives, we have certain funds that get restricted. For example, I have an HSA, and a lot of folks have an HSA for their health savings account. Those funds can be used for very specific things, and even though I own it, I own that, and I own my own bank account, I can't necessarily use my health savings account for the same things I could use in my bank account.
Right.
And it's really similar to a city. From a legal standpoint, yes, the city of Fountain is the utility and is the general government, which is the general fund. But from a legal standpoint, those two things can never cross. And when I say never, it's not really never, because even with this building, we talked about how we can certainly benefit from that by leasing the building. Or in some cases, utilities pays a portion of our HR costs or those sorts of things. So, but from just a general standpoint, using utility dollars, which remember a lot of which are paid for, especially on the electric side, folks who are outside the boundaries of the city of Fountain, using those for general government things inside the city of Fountain is problematic.
Okay.
Is that sort of explain that? Okay.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? And I got to bring us back to the discussion at hand, which is the 10 million awarding to Daniel Berry. So, Mr. Couch.
Darrell Couch, Ponteras. I just want to know if the relocation of the SCADA equipment is considered in the cost of that $10 million, since it's considerable distance from the current location to the new location.
Mr. Couch, yes, that is included in the construction project, and we work closely with Lisa and the IT folks on all the requirements for that.
Okay. Any other questions? Any further questions from council? Okay. See no other questions. Let's make a motion one way or the other. Mr. Geek.
Make a motion to approve resolution 19058.
And Mr. Lauer.
I second that.
Have a motion and second for approval. Please vote.
6 yes, motion carried.
Okay. Item 9C, request for a beer and wine retail liquor license reissue application for Dragon King LLC, DBA Dragon King Restaurant located at 6867 Mesa Ridge Parkway. Ms. Carneal?
Dragon King Restaurant is located up on top of the mesa near the Safeway. They have allowed their license to expire, and that expired on June 6th of 2019. The establishment has had a license in good standing since 2008. And the Colorado Liquor Code states that any license who has been expired for 90 days, but less than 180 days, is required to submit a reissue license before the authority. So that's what you have before you here tonight. The current license has been expired for 103 days prior to submitting for the reissue application. And the applicant has submitted payment of all of the fees and fines that were required with that application. And I don't see him here this evening.
Okay. Is there a reason why they let it expire, or they just forgot?
I think it was just, they've transferred some job duties, and he came in very frantic, so.
Okay. Okay, and same people, same everything, just,
Same everything, nothing's changed, they just didn't renew.
okay, so it's just for a reissue. Okay, any questions? Okay. Mr. Applegate?
I move to recommend that we I move that we recommend the request for reissue of beer and wine license for Dragon King Limited.
Okay. Mr. Geek? Second. Okay, we have a motion and second for approval. Please vote.
6 yes, motion carried.
Right, thank you. Item 9D, introduction of the draft broadband feasibility study for Fountains Electric Service Territory. Ms. Godwin.
Hi, City Council. I'm going to be presenting this with Curtis Mitchell, and we are introducing our broadband feasibility study. The first thing that I want to mention that the broadband feasibility study is an objective of our strategic priority for improving telecommunication services within this region. Before we go into the feasibility study, I want to bring us back to an exercise we did with our consultant, HR Green, last year, and this is our competing values framework. And I want you to look at the two top graphics right now where it has ubiquity and system profitability, and see where City Council, your marks are in orange and city staffs are in green. I want you to see the values that you guys answered with. Ubiquity was important. The second graphic down, low cost and affordability. Now, if you jump down to the last one, it talks about
real quickly for people who might not be familiar with the word ubiquity, explain what that means.
It means equal access. So we're talking that everyone has the same access everywhere. Okay. Now, if we jump down to the last graphic, we're talking about subsidies versus standalone cash flow and profitability. So if you look at it, some of the values change for City Council. It moves from ubiquity and affordability, and when you look at subsidizing it, it changes a little bit to profitability. I want you guys to think about these values as we move forward and go through the results of the feasibility study. So next, we hired Finley Engineering and CCG Consulting to conduct the feasibility analysis. Finley Engineering did a high-level design and estimated the cost for building the fiber network. Think about that's the capital expense cost. CCG Consulting did the financial models with several different scenarios. We're doing that. We looked at the own and operate, partnership, and open access. So as we look at these financial models, you want to look at it in kind of two different areas. We've got the capital expense, but when you actually look at the loan amount is going to be more because you are going to pay for that entity to run until the cash flow is enough to keep operations running and to pay back that loan amount. Now, there are a number of assumptions that go into the financial models. And as you look at it, the assumptions are variables. There's about 800 inputs into a financial model. And on the next slide, we're going to show some of the summaries of the financial model. And I understand that this slide is extremely busy, but it has a lot of important information onto it. The first 2/3 of it has to do with the own and operate retail model for the city. As you look at that second line, it says break even with revenue bonds. So that's looking at revenue bonds, which means the revenue generated from the new entity would pay back that bond amount. The total loan would be $55.5 million. And in order to achieve a break-even rate, you need a take rate of 54%. That means 54 of the homes that you pass have to sign up for service in order to get enough revenue in to pay back that loan, still have net income positive and cash at year 25. Now, some of those assumptions, I told you that there's 800 inputs into the model. Some of those assumptions have a little impact and some of them have a very large impact. One of the ones that has a very large impact is just increasing broadband prices. If you increase the base broadband prices $5 per month at the beginning, it can equate to an increase of $15.2 million over the 25-year period. If you increase that cash flow, the year 25 cash, that means you can lower the take rate. The other thing that has a big impact is staffing. If you reduce the staffing from 15 full-time employees over the course of a 25-year period to 12.5, you can increase the cash flow by $8.5 million. Another thing that has a very big impact on the financial model is the bond interest rate. We had a bond interest rate in our base financial models of 4.5%. If you decrease that down to 3%, it increases the cash by 13.6 million. So these are some things that you can change in the model that has very positive impacts. On the other side, though, I want you to look at towards the end of the bottom, there's a line that says lifeline scenario. So if we want a low income option where we chose 7.8% of the population falls below the poverty line, so we use 7.8%. That would take up a low income option. If we utilize that, it increases the break-even amount and the take rate to adding 4%. So it adds an additional risk. Another thing is shared departments throughout the city. If we want to allocate some of those resources, their salaries to this new entity, then that cost. So that the partial allocation, you can see right the line below it, adds some costs and lowers the cash over the 25-year period. So there are some big impacts for all these different assumptions. And I just wanted to show how these assumptions and how sensitive some of the financial models are. And as we move forward in thinking about your values and what's important for improving telecommunication services. Now, if you look at the bottom third of the table, we look at the public-private partnership and the open access models. So for the first scenario in the public-private partnership is we have the city building the infrastructure and an ISP coming and running on it. So the city would assume the risk of building the infrastructure and assume the cost. On that second scenario, the partner would provide the infrastructure from the curb to the home. So they would provide some infrastructure. As you could see, the financial model comes out more positive in that light for the city. On the last one is the open access. So open access, think of it like a freeway. You build the infrastructure and anybody can run on it. Now, one thing that I want to mention is we have not approached any partner we have not spoken to any partners or potential partners about these financial models. So that hasn't been approached, and we don't know if there's anybody that would be interested. So if we want to move forward, we might want to go out for an IFP. We might want to go out for a RFI to see the interest level. What's next is our survey. So our consultant, we conducted 2 surveys that were very similar. We use the same question, and this is the results from the question: do you support the city building and operating a broadband utility? On the left is from CCG Consulting. They did a phone survey in which they bought phone numbers within this area. On the right-hand side is a Fountain email and event survey. So this went out to Fountain utility e-bill users. Now, if you take a look at both of these, I would combine them and use the average for the results for the entire area. They can be skewed in either direction. For the phone survey, we assume that most of the users are landlines. And on the email and event survey, we're assuming most are already internet users. So as the group, we looked at it and we figured that it was probably somewhere on the average is the results. So in blue, it says that they support. Red represents they do not support, and green represents they need more information to move forward. And again, the question asked was, do you support the city building and operating a broadband utility?
Before you go forward,
Yep.
how many participants participated on the phone survey and also the email survey?
Okay, for the phone survey, it was about 400, and for the email and event survey, it was about 650.
Lisa, when you say the email survey, so these are customers that have signed up through utilities to pay their bill online?
Correct.
And so that would be the only reason we would have their emails?
Correct.
We didn't just randomly
Correct.
pick people, and so
It was e-bill users.
it was e-bill users?
Correct.
Okay, alrighty. And then, what events were you at for the event survey?
So moving out at the park, and then there was the farmer's market, and I went to, I'm trying to think, it was on Saturday. I believe it was a Fall Fest. So.
Okay. So a different variety of events that would maybe
Different
bring in
variety
a
of
different
events.
variety of people?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Oh.
so if somebody didn't get the e-survey and they didn't happen to be at either of those 3 events, it wasn't they were being excluded or anything?
Correct.
It was just that they were, didn't happen to be at those events?
Correct. And the other reason why we stopped going to events is once we started getting the results back from the fountain email, and we found that the results weren't changing. So we hit a point where we hit a statistically valid survey where any more that we were doing wasn't changing the percentage of the answers. So we thought that we had hit the statistically valid survey at that point. So the other thing that I want to mention as we move forward and we think about how we want to move forward is think about what the benefits are to the community if we move forward. We've got improved opportunities for residences and businesses. We have the opportunity to attract new residences and businesses, educational opportunities, improved real estate values, also in closing the digital divide. However, there's no guarantee that a new venture is going to be successful. There is going to be risk. There's the potential to default on bonds if the new venture does not create enough revenue. The potential for telecommunications are not improved. And there's also it could be the loss of economic development opportunities. So as we move on, I want to talk about our initial conclusions. Our initial conclusions is when we got this back is that we had higher capital costs than anticipated, and we had a higher loan amount, and we had a higher take rate than anticipated. Now, on October 22nd, our consultants are going to be here to present this material as well. So if you have any questions, if you guys can send it to us before then, I hope to get all the answers before October 22nd, so we can talk about how to move forward. That's the other thing I want you guys to think about is how you would like to move forward. Do we want to go into more analysis of the risks and assumptions? We saw the table, we saw how sensitive it can be to some variables. Do we want to go and look at that a little bit more in-depthly? Do we want to look at evaluation of other alternatives? Do we want to contact other ISPs to see if they want to be featured, if they want to be partners with us? Or do we want to other options that we can explore? We're looking at the potential for us to be eligible for DOLA funds, what all that entails. If there's any federal funding, if we are eligible for any of the new federal funding that has been released. So we want to engage with City Council and figure out what's the best way to move forward. Because as we look back, we want to make sure that we are improving telecommunication services. And it may not be exactly how we thought it was going to be when we move forward with this feasibility analysis. And we want to figure out what's important to council. As we go back to that competing values framework, what's important? What does the council value?
If we were to look at partners,
Mm-hmm.
who essentially would we reach out to?
So there's a number of things that we could do. We could contact them directly, or we could put out an RFI or an RFP to see if anybody's interested, to gauge the interest level, and see what the interest level would be. And then if you wanted to look at partners, do we want to look at a partnership or an open access model? So the one thing, if you read through the feasibility study, is both the legal consultant and CCG Consulting strongly advises against open access because it hasn't been successful in many areas. What happens is there's no incentive for the ISP to work hard to gain customers to get that take rate to pay back the capital investment. However, if you look at Amon, Idaho, they're doing something unique where if someone signs up, that homeowner, it's like a tap fee. So they essentially pay a tap fee in order to connect to the infrastructure. And that tap fee is associated with the house. So there's different ways we can look at it. When you're talking about partnership, are you talking about potentially looking at partnerships for an open access or partnerships for a single partnership? And there's different ways we could do it.
Well, if it's open access, we wouldn't have a partner.
Oh,
would we?
that's correct. Correct. Yep. But it's also finding ISPs that will run on the open access.
That would be our job to find them?
It could be, because if we have an open access, it would be advertising to get companies to run on it. So I still think you would have to advertise, at least to have companies, if you opened it up, to get them to run it. That is one problem that we've read about for open access is you may start with a bunch of companies, and this happened and I believe at Utopia in Utah, is they essentially started with a bunch of ISPs. Some of them went out of business, and they end up with only one or two that are running with on that open access model.
So say if we were moving forward 6 years into the project, 7 years, everything's fine, 8, 9 years, things start going downhill. We're finding out that it's gonna be difficult to recover. Essentially, it's turning out to be a loss.
Uh-huh.
Out.
We don't have one.
Well, not out, but what solution?
Options?
Yeah, what are our solutions to, help, balance this back?
Well, it depends on how you'd want to move forward and how dire the situation would be. If it's so bad that you're looking for other people to, if you're looking then for a partnership, if we were doing it own and operate and you wanted someone else to run it, if you would look for a partnership or for a partner to buy it, or to run it, or to buy it, or to sell it to another incumbent ISP or to a separate ISP. So that would be an option then. The last option would be, the worst would be to default on the loans, or to have another entity within the city, whether the general city absorb the subsidy or the electric utility absorb it, absorb the loss or the hit.
So I guess that would lead me over to Carl and, Curtis. I mean, would you guys be in a position to wanna pick up the ball and carry, cause we're talking about a lot of money here.
I think that's the whole discussion we're having now is do we want to do this? And for me, and knowing some of the other communities, granted not a lot, but the other communities who are doing this, it's the option for the entire community that's the most appealing, and us providing that for them. When we went to the franchise agreement with Comcast, I don't know what year we're in now, but it was a 10-year franchise agreement. One of the biggest sticking points for me was, are you going to be able to get this out to the entire community? And they made that, well, sure we will, but for me it wasn't quick enough, and for our underserved areas of town. So the likelihood, and I'm not a prognosticator of a lot of things, but this is one of those things, the likelihood of this not being successful far into the future is I mean, this is where the world is going. So it would have to be doing something really dumb in order to get this thing to fail, I would think. But I wouldn't pin it on Curtis and Carl on that, I guess, is my question.
Well, I'm not putting it on you, but my question is, let's go back to Comcast, for example. They're still not servicing everybody as they promised they would 5, 6 years ago, are they? Am I right?
We have areas that we've learned they're underserved, yes.
Okay, so they have not fulfilled their obligational contract either.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, if we were to reach and get in that type of quagmire, I mean, only God knows what's in the future.
Understand. So, Mayor Pro Tem,
Okay, go ahead.
we have learned from other communities, and some of them we thought were the gold standard. And as we have learned more, as we've connected with our consultants, Lisa's done an incredible job of research on this.
Yeah.
So we've learned some of the ones that looked really good aren't as good as we thought. So like Chattanooga, Tennessee, we learned that they're being subsidized by the electric fund. And as we go back to what we talked about when we did the workshop with you, that's not where we want to land in the end. But there are other communities where that is their reality, is that there is another fund, and in their case, it's electric utility that is carrying part of the load. And that's part of what we're trying to avoid. And that's why we're doing all of this work, and that's why we're going to walk through this with you tonight, and again next month.
And Lisa, I know she's done a phenomenal job. One of the things that's concerning me right off the bat is that when we look at the survey, that's less than 1% of the population that's here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big concern right there off the bat. And then, we have to take in consideration that southern El Paso County, the majority of the most impoverished people live in the southern quarter of the county, which also includes us.
Mm-hmm.
So then I have to go back in my mind and I have to look at, times where we had the opportunity, where we've asked, our customers when it dealt with utilities and stuff, if it was possible to hold on to certain, monies, but they wanted a rebate back. Because, you know, we're the ones who hear the hardship of people, when we talk in terms of raising rates, of we trying to squeeze another $1, $2, $3 out of the individual. So these are things we do have to think about.
Yep.
And
Go ahead, no finish.
oh, and so which brings me back to the possibility of failure. And yes, if we were talking, now Fountain all of a sudden was Boulder, yeah, we're talking about two different things here, and let's not be naive about this point. If we're talking about Boulder, Loveland, Longmont, the possibility of success would be a lot greater than what we're actually talking about right now. And so I just think we just need, you know, to be realists while we look at this. And I'm in favor of technology. I know the need is going forward. But at the same time, I have to wonder if we're in a position that we can actually pull this off. And that's why I'm asking this question.
Yeah, and let me counter those questions a little bit. As far as the statistics, this comes up every time we have a survey of some kind, and this is nationally as well. Well, you have a small percentage, but again, as Lisa said, when you look at statistics and the science behind statics, numbers, sorry, statistics, once you hit a certain number, and usually that's what, 500, 600, that's a very representative number for the population, regardless of size.
Yep.
And you'll see Gallup polls that don't really go past a certain number, and we're looking at, you know, nationwide, and they're doing, you know, only in the thousands of numbers, and they're pretty representative of what the cross-section of America is looking at. So I get that concern that, well, you've only asked 600 people. Well, really, and as she said, if they kept going, the numbers wouldn't have changed, and if they did, it would have been pretty minuscule. On your point around the lower income, I think this is our opportunity to provide for them the most. When I think of CenturyLink and Comcast, who are our two biggest providers in the city of Fountain, and I'll just throw out my own house of what I pay, Comcast, and I'm close to, I think, $90 for only 250 gigabytes of service. And I'm looking at Longmont, who's been doing it for a while, and I'm right on their page right now. So again, 250 megabits
Yep.
of service is what I'm paying $90 for right now, and that's with the boost and all this extra stuff that they're saying they're giving me. And it's funny, I just got an email saying, "Hey, guess what? We're giving you 25 more megabits." To me, that's not a whole lot, but Longmont is able to provide 1 gigabit of service or gigabyte of service for $70. So even if we were to, and not that we are, but if we were to do $70 for a gigabyte of service here in Fountain, I'd be paying less for 750 more megabits than is even being offered now. One of the things I know hasn't been brought up, but I think is a point of discussion as well we can get into further. I know Comcast has a service for kind of those families who just need a service. And it's a very small megabit. I think we're talking like 25 megabits, and it's like $9.99 a month. And so there's those options that we could also provide that, but you know, the population that I work with and the things that I see with the families I work with, and we have different socioeconomic statuses in where I work, people are willing to pay for good internet service. And if we could provide 1 gigabyte of service for $70, and that's just, that would be the max. I mean, we could do 250, we could do, I mean, we kind of control that and what those prices would be. But it would be enough, I think we could really provide some good internet service that's not dial-up for a reasonable price for all that live here in our service area of the electric department. So
Also, can I say something?
in a second when I'm finished.
I thought you were. Sorry.
So, you know, to those points, I see where you're going, and that's why this is a good opportunity for us to do that. But again, we're not tying ourselves to this, and I really think the success is, I'm obviously for this quite a bit, because I think what we can provide our citizens is something a lot of companies who do this as their job, they can't do, frankly. Now Comcast does do 1 gigabyte, but it's pretty expensive. It's in the hundreds of dollars, so, right. Okay, Mr. Applegate. Hold on 1 second. Yeah.
Now, I noticed in your survey here, you were talking about the ages, the average age of the residents, and you said it was like 36 or something?
Which survey? Because I don't believe we asked for
Had
age. in
average
either one.
age of the citizens?
Okay, that's the demographics I sent out yesterday.
Right.
Yep.
And that was 36?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a lot of young people. To
Correct.
get that average, there's younger than that. So I think, I don't know, to fail, it would have to be pretty, in this day and age, it may start out slow, but it seems to me like it would be picked up pretty fast as people got the information and the ability to get that. I think they'd be pretty anxious to get it.
I will have public in a second, so just hold on to your question, okay?
We've got just a little bit more.
Do you want to?
Huh?
Yeah, we've got a little bit more just to wrap this up, Mayor.
Okay, do you want to ask your question now or wait? Okay.
Okay,
Do you want to go ahead?
yeah, you want me to?
Go ahead. I just want to mention one thing as for the Comcast Internet Essentials. That was one of the things that we went through, and that's our lifeline scenario. So that brings up the take rate a little bit. But we did consider that for 7.8% of the population within the area. So.
So Mayor and Council, I want to make it clear to all of you that tonight is just an introduction. What we want to do is we want to get it out there in the public and out there for you. Lisa's had a chance to meet with you individually as well. But we want to put our findings on the table and go public with those. We recognize that we have more work to do. We will have our consultant here October 22nd, and we're going to get into more detail with you in a public session. But we're also wanting to have you think about what are the next steps? What are the things that you want us to continue to work on? Would it be wise for us to get back together again in a workshop type of a format where we initially talked about what are the things that we value? And that's where that chart came from. So back to a couple of the key takeaways from the core team that's been working on this. So Brandy, myself, Lisa, Greg Bowlby, and Carl, we spent a lot of time working on this. And I think all of you know, going into this, we were all very excited about this and about the prospect of this, about what we were seeing in other communities. We were seeing take rates around 30%. We were seeing numbers lower for the capital investment. We were very careful in the selection of our consultant. We wanted a consultant that was going to give us the truth, not trying to sell us on whatever it would take to move this forward. And we heard from other communities that they had consultants that did just that. And then some of those communities are kind of in over their head, is what we found. We don't want to do that. We want to get the right information to help you all, along with staff, to help facilitate us towards the right decision-making and the right direction. One of the things I want to point out back on this busy slide, when you get to the far side that says, when do you cover your debt? Lisa and Greg Bowlby have run a lot of scenarios. The assumptions are somewhat conservative in nature, so they have tweaked the assumptions. I've sat with Lisa at her desk and watched her go through this, an enormous amount of work. And again, it's because we'd like to find out some way that this thing works and a way that we can mitigate risk. But when you look at that last column to the right, there's risk. We've got a 50% plus take rate, not a 30%. And we go almost out to 25 years with any one of the scenarios that we've run, which means that you have to maintain that take rate for a long time. It means after the initial launch of this and the excitement of the community, and a lot of people sign up initially, we have to continue to market. We have to continue to stay up with technology, because in 10 years, who knows what it will look like, right? So we have to stay up with technology to keep that community engagement, that level of participation in this. So, so the couple of takeaways that we want to leave you with is that a little bit higher on the cost, and then we've really been working on mitigation of the risk, evaluation of the risk, trying to do a good job of communicating to you what the risk looks like, and also that we have more work to do. At the end of the discussion tonight, I think we can confidently say that we will get to the point where we have a solution that does support this strategic priority. At the end of the discussion, though, it might not look exactly like we thought it was going to, and that's okay. It might look like a different type of a partnership in the end as we evaluate some additional alternatives and options, some that may be less risky, maybe easier to implement. So again, I want to leave you with that we do have more work to do. But we wanted to introduce this to you, introduce the feasibility study to you, the findings of that feasibility study to you, and then just have this interaction. But this is just the beginning of another couple of months of a lot of work.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Thompson?
Lisa, one of the things that you said was in one of your slides. Do we call them slides anymore? Okay.
I'm gonna stop.
Was when you were talking about pros and risks, loss of economic development opportunities. Could you go into a little bit more about that?
Yep, a few of the conferences that I've been to, it used to be an economic advantage if you had high-speed internet. Now it's being said that if you don't have it and you don't offer it, you're not brought to the table. Kimberly might be able to expand a little bit more on that, but that's basically a few of the things that have been said in some of the sessions that I've been in on.
So high-speed internet for a business anymore really is not a luxury.
It's not a luxury. It's now required, and people assume that you have it.
Right, and if we're trying to attract a younger workforce that can pretty much work out of their house, it's a necessity for their job.
Correct.
Okay, right. Which if you're working out of your house is great because you're putting out less carbon emissions and not driving and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, and then I wanted to make sure that we apartments and condominiums, because I got through about a third of the report, will all be included in this because some of the ISP providers don't necessarily want to provide service for multi-dwelling units.
Correct. So MDUs are a challenge. They are included in the study and they are included in the financial model. They're harder to get into because sometimes the builders, they contract with a certain provider or an ISP for a number of years. And then it's the complication of not necessarily bringing the infrastructure to the building. It's from the side of the building into each unit. So we've counted them basically as MDUs. The take rate is not as aggressive as a single family home or a business, but they are included in the study because it's taking those risks of trying to get into the multi-dwelling units. You're welcome.
Okay. I know we had one question from, at least come.
Actually, it's two now. Teresa Bod, Berry Farm Road. Thank you for taking my question. One of the questions I had was how often, what's the frequency of replacing the hardware? Switch is typically 5 years for best.
So that has been included in the financial model. So that's been included in the financial model. It's the reinvestment of capital costs. So if we were to bring up the entire financial model, you'll see that there's new capital investments every few years. I believe most of them, the capital investment costs, I think were 1.5 million over a course of groupings of years at intervals within the 25-year period. And I can't tell you exactly what the electronics replacement is on there, but we do have a capital investment cost on there.
Because I know the mega monster UPSs can cost you $5,000 each.
Yep, and
Okay.
that's all been taken into consideration.
Yeah.
Yep.
The other question I had was, are you going to offer other services, TV, phone, voice over IP phones, things like that?
Yep. Let me bring it back to.
I didn't see that. Sorry, my eyesight's not that good from back there.
Okay, so if you go here, I can show you right here. That's on there. So if you go down on the first third, there's a line item that says no cable TV, broadband only. So if you look at that, when we're looking at the financial model, this is looking at the triple play. After going through the scenarios, we found that it wasn't going to be viable for the broadband only. If you look at that, the net positive income and the cover the debt never to move forward with just a broadband product with the financial model. So as you look further with the no cable TV, that means it's the one line above it. That means that it's just the telephone and the internet. Again, the cover debt is never. So we were looking at a triple play option.
Because I know for myself, that's one of the gimmies. You bundle it all together and
Has
it's
to
one
be a
bill. You don't have to do, like I used to do, DirecTV, CenturyLink, and all that. Thank you.
Yep, thank you for the question.
Derek Couch, Pond Terrace. I feel like we're stepping into a minefield with clown shoes on. Longmont had FTTP, which is fiber to the premises. That was one of their big selling points because they were able to boost the throughput by having fiber all the way to the final residences. I know that, and I've read the full report, and they're making an assumption of 53% penetration or 53% acceptance. The people that said they would actually go for that were about 28%, and then there were two more percentage brackets that said maybe, depends on what it cost. I'm not sure that but the report said, well, we're going to make an assumption from all that information, and we're going to say that 28% now jumps to 53%, which breaks the 50% penetration rate to make it work. I know that they repeated consistently that there was a lot of conservative notes in there. They also said that working it with partners wasn't the most likely scenario. I don't know how to break this news to you, but in our city staff, and no degradation intended, we don't have the capability to operate this department currently. Nor do we have engineers on staff to design this system currently. I know it's using a lot of passive. They're talking about using passive extension to the houses, which makes perfect sense because we don't need the major throughput. We don't need the bits to be staggered and compounded so you can put more throughput through. We're not doing huge databases. But they're using a $50 fee, and remember, this is not replacing everything you're paying now. This is internet. I mean, you could use phone over internet. You can use anything you're going to use on the internet. That's your throughput. It doesn't bring you your entertainment costs, anything else that you want to do. Those are access points. That's only an access point. And their balance point was $50. That was the number they used for per household to do their calculations. And so that means that you're going to tell people that you're going to give them good service, possibly at $50, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. No, probably no less. But if everything works, and this is in their report, if everything works, I mean, it's really it's a fine line. If everything works right, and you keep your employees down until you get the system up and running good, and you have enough people on board, and you get the right breaks with buying the equipment at the right time, and 5G doesn't come in and blow you right out of the water and you're down the hole because you're behind the curve. I think I'm not against pursuing it, but I think we need to wade into it very carefully and use a lot of good judgment, because there's a lot of things that could go wrong with this. More things that could go wrong than could go right. And I know that Longmont did it. Longmont also got a goodly portion of their people on board by selling them into the idea of subscribing to it before they even up and running. But I have a lot of reservations that a lot of a lot of this thought hasn't been done, and if we're not really careful about this, it could be a boondoggle. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks.
They did say that the majority of our stuff in their consideration was above ground, which means that it will not last as long as the below ground, but they say that since the majority of fountains, their report says since the majority of fountains services are on poles, that the fiber, they did their study saying that the majority of the service would be on poles, which is it's a higher maintenance rate, something else that would probably come into play fairly quickly.
And just for clarification purposes, that cost that I pay is only for internet. I don't get cable, all those things that you mentioned, I do pay on top of that. So, I realize those numbers as well, and I think, that's where a lot of people are going to nowadays anyway, is, they just need the internet, and then they'll do everything else past that. I don't use home phone, I don't do any of that stuff, so.
Doesn't take blazing speed to do email.
Right.
It's for all the other things.
Right. Right, and having 2 teenage daughters at home? Yeah.
Gordon Rick, Daffodil Street. Last year, everybody here, we did an exercise when we were doing the strategic priorities, and we were asked to describe Fountain. And one of the adjectives we came up with was frugal. This is a very frugal town, and the survey results bear that out. I'm going to quote here. It's a bit mind-boggling to see that most CenturyLink customers are unhappy with their speed when there is another alternate provider in the city that offers faster speeds. CCG is just speculating, but this also might be due to the price, since CenturyLink DSL is generally priced less than Comcast broadband. The thing that I look at is if we can't get the price down below what's out there commercially, we're going to have a really hard time getting customers into this system that we're proposing to build, because we have a frugal customer base. That's the bottom line for me. I understand there's a whole lot of concerns about, the total price and everything, but if we can't keep the price down to where we're the low-cost leader, we're going to struggle hard.
Okay, thank you. And so this conversation will continue in October on the 22nd. It's at our council meeting, and I think we're going to keep it mostly to that discussion, right? So maybe we can focus that a little bit differently, so we can have a more broader discussion on that at that night. So, I didn't hear one word you just said. Sorry.
Consultants, both Finley Engineering and CCG Consulting will be here.
Okay.
For that October 22nd meeting.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for the information. We look forward to more. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to call somebody up here, or can they call you? Okay. Lisa, and we'll get that information out. In the meantime.
Lisa, can we get Lisa's number on the record, please? Or her, and her email address?
Our phone number is 719-322-2052, and the email is lisa at lgodwin@fountaincolorado.org.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 10, correspondence, comments, and ex officio reports. Mr. Trainer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few things to hit on real quick. Just wanted to report that the Recreation Committee continues to meet and discuss a recreation facility. That's been a big thing. We've had a couple new members join us. That's been very helpful, and we'll continue to plug on. Trunk or Treat is coming up October 25th. We'll be putting out more information on that. That's right out here in front of City Hall from 5 to 7. So again, that's October 25th. And then two other quick announcements. Well, really one announcement tied together. Next Thursday, the 26th. No, wait. Yeah, this Thursday. Sorry. This Thursday, the 26th, 4 p.m., we will have ribbon cutting for Duckwood. The entrance, and that's at 4 o'clock p.m. again on Thursday. We'll be opening that up, and it's kind of an exciting point for us. The entrance will be off Mesa Road. So as Mesa Road, as you come off the hill, there's a dirt road that accesses over there, and so you'll want to come off of that because that's the way we'll access it for parking. And then just by way of information, Brandy also wanted me sort of tied to that to let everyone know that the Mesa Railroad crossing will close October 1st. Yeah, so you'll have that Mesa crossing that will close October 1st. So we'll have just a few days, less than a week, before the railroads shut that down. So I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware of that.
The city is not shutting that down.
No, it's not us shutting it down.
The railroad is shutting
It'll be
it.
the railroad shutting
But
it
they'll
down.
still be able to go down Mesa and across Syracuse, correct? Or
Yes.
Syracuse up
Yes,
to Mesa?
absolutely.
Just not over the crossing?
You got it.
Okay.
And eventually that will connect down to Duckwood, but that'll happen when a development occurs.
Okay. Thanks to Brandy for coming on board, number one, and figuring it all out for us and getting us to this point. So thank you. Troy. Chief. Other chief.
Oh, just a couple events, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Want to give you an update on about 35 special events that combined public safety department supported over the summer, whether they're city events, boys and girls birthday parties. Specifically, I want to highlight the 10 events that took place at PPIR, Pikes Peak International Raceway, over the summer, from tiny homes to concert to this last weekend, culminated with the Hot Rod Rock and Roll Rumble, which we supported, and it was attended by about 5,000 to 6,000 people throughout the weekend. So, really great event, super safe. Throughout that, we probably touched 20,000 people through all those events. We only issued out 2 citations during the entire time. So, good crowd, safe environment, cooperative people. Those are all good things, and I just want to highlight that. And that's really to the public safety workers that work that. Both James and I, subordinates leaders, and our young firefighters and cops are down there, and they did a tremendous job. Law enforcement torch run supporting Special Olympics, able to attend the opening ceremonies last week. It was a very touching, very moving event. It's supported by 1,200 law enforcement officers from throughout the world. Attended that thing. It took place in Aurora, Colorado over the last week. Awesome athletes on hand that were so excited that police officers were there to celebrate with them. It was great. Started in 1985. I was telling Scott this, with a chief in Wichita, Kansas, that started. They raised $300 their first year, and this year the numbers came in at $60 million raised to support Special Olympics. So just a tremendous accomplishment. Last thing, Shield 616 attended a ceremony today where 2 of our newest officers received their gear from sponsors within the community. That program continues to go strong. If you recall, last year, Von Miller and the Denver Broncos raised $250,000 to support that organization, which was outstanding. Recently, ESPN and NCAA football contacted Jake, who started here, former CSPD cop. They're going to change a bowl this year. You're going to have a first responder bowl. It's going to take place in the Dallas, Texas area. And the halftime presentation and benefactor for all that will be Shield 616 local. So there's going to be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that will go into that organization, continue it to help provide that gear for first responders across the country. They're in like 9 states now. We're going to work on the Fountain Fire Department next. They are truly appreciative for the city of Fountain support. We support that organization and their leaders wherever they go. We always attend their events. Even that the police department has our stuff, we still support. And we're going to continue to do that because it's a great organization. We'll work on the fire department the next year or 2. So thank you very much. I thought those were good updates, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, I think it's more, we're grateful for their support. If it wasn't for them, we would not be anywhere close to where we are.
It's a
with
great, I
providing what we
truly
need for-
believe that.
That stuff's expensive, and for a family or organization to put money into 616 for one individual or multiple police officers is a big deal. And so for them to go out and get that money and get that going is a really good thing. So thanks for continuing that partnership. Okay. Mr. Trilch. Ms. Carneal, anything? Mayor Pro Tem, anything more? Mr. Geek? Mr. Applegate? Mr. Lauer?
Nothing besides, I think you made a wise choice waiting, or making me wait till next month's meeting to throw my 25 cents in on the broadband.
I did that on purpose. No, I was wondering when you were going to say something. So. All right.
Yeah, it was
Okay,
good choice.
Ms. Thompson? Oh, okay. That's item number 10. Number 11 is announcement of executive sessions. Troy?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to request an executive session. Ms. Carneal, would you mind reading that for
Sure.
me?
I have a request for executive session pursuant to CRS Section 24-6-4024E for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and/or instructing negotiators.
Okay. Mr. Lauer?
Move to go into executive session as requested.
And Mr. Geek?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
6 yes, motion carried.
Okay, our regular meeting is adjourned. We'll see you on October 8th.